in 1 Corinthians today, we have this passage. Everybody knows this one, right? This is like part of Paul's greatest hits. Many members, one body. You know, if there were no noses, how could we smell the diapers that need changing? Wait, that's the Parents' Bible. But this is one of those passages that we know so well. And I don't know if it's next week or the week after, we're getting the love passage from 1 Corinthians. A passage we certainly know, because all of us fail miserably at that one, right? Love is patient, love is kind, love never does this, love never does that. So these are all very familiar passages that we're getting from 1 Corinthians. So it can be easy to read it and say, oh, I know that one, I've got it. But, like the folks in our first reading, we come together and we hear from each other, and maybe we can hear this differently. So, the word that struck me in this passage this time around was the word member. Because we're preparing for our annual meeting today, and so we need to know who our members are, how many we are, do we have a quorum? You know, we need to elect voting members for our Synod Assembly, members for our council, members, right? The word members has been in my head a lot lately, and then I'm reading it here. And one of the commentaries I read, struck me as really interesting. That when I think about membership, and I think probably when most of us think about membership, church membership, we're thinking about ourselves as part of an organization, right? Like the congregation has members, we've got like a list, we participate, we're involved, we belong. But it's this very sort of individuals coming together in a group kind of a thing. Like being a member of any other organization. But Paul is talking about membership in a very different way. And a way I actually like a lot better than the way I've been thinking about it. These are many members of one body. I talk a lot about the body of Christ. I love the idea of the body of Christ. I love the idea that we are all members of the body of Christ. Through baptism, we have been made members, one to another. But what does that really mean? It means so much more than being the member of a club or being the member of an organization. It is so much deeper, so much messier than membership, the way we think of it. Than just having a card, being a card-carrying member. The different members of a body, the different body parts, all work together. And they all affect each other, for good or for ill. There's all this talk these days about the impact that our gut bacteria has on, like, our mood and our, the rest of our body's ability to function is like ruled by our gut in some ways, which is to me like kind of awesome and kind of weird, right? But this is the membership that Paul is talking about. And I mean, anybody who's ever like hurt your foot or your knee and tried to just work through that on your own knows that suddenly your hip hurts, right? And then your shoulder, and then like your neck's kind of weird. This is the membership. This is the connectedness that Paul is talking about. If your foot is hurting, suddenly your whole body's moving differently to accommodate it. And other things are going to get out of joint. This is what it means to be a member. To have an impact on everybody else. And to be impacted by everybody else. And to have a care. about those relationships. When Paul says if one member suffers, all of us are suffering. Martin Luther King Jr. said something similar. There can be no justice, I'm butchering the quote, but if there's injustice anywhere, none of us have justice. If we don't all have peace, none of us. If one of us is living without peace, none of us can have peace. And so on. If one member is suffering, we are all impacted by that. We had a very real world example of that just end with the shutdown ending. Government employees were suffering. They missed 2 paychecks before the shutdown ended. I was listening to a report on the news about how it wasn't, of course, just government employees, but also federally funded programs. So Section 8 housing was going to run out of money, or did. I can't remember the exact detail, but there was a risk to Section 8. So people receiving Section 8 housing are at risk, obviously, right? But the interview was not with a Section 8 recipient. It was with a landlord who said, because Section 8 isn't getting paid, I can't pay my mortgage on the building where the people are living. I'm going to lose my building. You know, there's like coffee shops who, because workers weren't coming into their jobs, their like morning rush was not a rush at all. If one member suffers, we all suffer. This is true not just because we are baptized Christians. This is just true. But as baptized Christians, as members of this body of Christ, we are called to remember those connections. We are called to recognize when others are suffering. And we are called to do something about it. Giving to the pantries is probably the least thing that we can do. It is certainly good and important, and it helps alleviate some of that suffering. But it might not be fixing the actual problem, right? When people are hungry, but that might be like the weird shoulder pain that was caused because your hip started to hurt, which started to hurt because you were favoring your one side, because you've got a bunion. And fixing the shoulder does nothing for the bunion. We are many members of one suffering body. And we are called in baptism to find not just the obvious ways to help each other, but the deeper ways, the harder ways, but the more lasting ways. Because it's not just suffering that we share, right? When one member is honored, Paul says, when one member is honored, all rejoice. We don't just share the bad stuff, but we share the good stuff too. We are one body. We are not just card-carrying members, but we are limbs connected with ligaments and stuff. We are a body formed by God, called to serve God. Thanks be to God. Amen.